I love technology.
Thanks for that introduction, Harry. Thanks for that introduction. Oh, we now know, everyone, that Harry loves technology. So this is the 7th, I think, podcast for Thinking Out Loud with George Farrar, Harry Morgan, and me.
Hello.
Yes, still confined to barracks in our houses, unfortunately.
Hopefully that'll change this week.
I agree.
Hopefully.
Is it Sunday or Thursday?
Yeah, it's Sunday that... Oh, it's Thursday they're announcing.
Thursday.
Oh, Thursday Is it Sunday that they're announcing?
Sunday they're announcing how they're going to gradually ease the lockdown, I believe. Back into normal life.
I think that's what's going to happen. And Friday is VE Day, so that's a good day.
It is. Speaking of
75 years.
75 years.
I did watch... There were 2 programs, VE Day in Colour.
Oh, I saw that last night, yes.
I'm going to watch that later. Something else.
Oh, it's worth a watch.
I did watch it and think, after watching that, you do sort of think people nowadays have to get a grip.
Yeah. Back in those days, you just had to get on with it. But I think a lot of people these days are just spoiled, really, to be honest. We've never had to endure any hardships until now, let's put it that way.
Yeah,
not just our generation, but the Generation Xers and the Boomers, basically.
Yeah, and we don't have bombers flying over our heads.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll put it this way, that my grandma said something a few days ago, and she lived through the Second World War. She was only young, but she lived through the Second World War. Her dad was away for 5 years, and she didn't recognise him when he came back, and he was also severely wounded. Oof. And she said the other day that this is our war, essentially, in terms of living through hardship.
Well, it's a pretty easy war.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy war.
It's nothing like being bombed to death night on night by the Germans.
No, but in terms of our lives being turned upside down, this is our equivalent.
It's probably the most disruptive. It's probably the most disruptive event to people's lives since the Second World War as well, and
certainly
most people.
Country.
Definitely. Most people weren't alive in the Second World War now. So, yeah, it just says a lot, really, about how unprecedented it is, really.
Yeah,
when without sounding awful, that I think we've done quite well in terms of, death toll.
Well, the thing what you got to remember,
especially compared to other, like
the USA, 65,000 in total.
Oh yeah.
How much was the daily death total which they had?
Well, on Sunday they had 2,061 deaths, I think, in a day, and also in I think it was Michigan. They had
Michigan's been hit very badly.
They had 900 workers in one factory got tested positive.
Oh no!
But then again, I do kind of think maybe you should all stop protesting and it wouldn't be that high.
Yeah, the protest. I mean, that's a good point of discussion. Actually, the protests that occurred, and it was in Michigan actually.
They're all over. They're in California now.
Yeah, but the protests, they were
also in California.
There were protests in all 50 states, but the ones that drew particular international attention were the ones that occurred in Michigan.
Yeah.
Because a group of, and these people are very libertarian. So they basically don't believe that the state should exist in any realistic way, shape or form. They believe that the state should function to the bare minimum. And a lot of their ideas are just clear-cut crazy.
Delusional, let's put it that way.
Yeah, they are also the kind of people who, very pro-Second Amendment, very pro-gun rights, all that kind of thing. And apparently, according to Michigan state law, you can take a rifle into the Michigan state legislature, which seems a bit bizarre.
Oh my God.
And that's exactly what these protesters did. They turned up at the Michigan state legislature, armed to the teeth with rifles, and started protesting. There wasn't a shootout. Nobody got killed. There was a gun didn't even go off. But it just seems a bit, that would never happen in this country.
Well, of course not. I mean, we're very anti-guns for a start.
Well, we're not allowed guns unless you go through a lot of bureaucracy to get them. But
I think I don't get
to the point where you might as well not bother.
Why can't they just see sense? and just
They define sense as the Constitution. That's
and
the
just
problem.
realize
That
that
is the problem.
they have the worst death toll in the world.
I mean, there's
And
obeying
the
a constitution,
population.
but
I was thinking about this actually, because some people have used the argument that they are a big country. Well, there's not actually that many people that live there for the size of the country.
That is true.
When you compare it to somewhere like India that has a
Or
billion
Bangladesh.
people, or Bangladesh,
Which
and they're supposed
Bangladesh
to be
has about 350 million people, and Bangladesh is
yeah.
tiny.
Well, so
Jeez,
America has 350 million.
yeah.
But let's be
Yeah,
honest.
But that's a big country.
And let's be honest, in the middle of it, there's hardly anybody there. And
Well, that's the Midwest for you.
They're supposed to be the most powerful country in the world. They should really be able to control it.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it depends as well on localized factors, because obviously in America, you have, a lot of the responses in America have been down to state governments as well, and some states have handled it considerably better than others. I mean, not wishing to sound partisan, but the Republican states haven't handled it too well. The states controlled by Democrats, with the exception of New York, have handled it considerably better.
I don't think you can. I think New York's just a. It's just you can't really compare it to anything because it's New York.
I mean, to be fair, it has one of the most populated cities in the world, the entire state.
Exactly.
So that might inflate the figures a bit.
Yeah. Plus, it's the world's major international travel hub, the world's largest. And London is the second largest.
The
world city, so to speak.
Yeah. But the thing is, with testing in this country, I mean, people keep going on about our figures, but they had on Andrew Marr's program on Sunday morning.
I hate Andrew Marr.
Yeah, I don't.
I think we all do here.
One of the big issues I have with his program is that it feels really outdated.
Yeah.
Now,
well, he is outdated.
Fine 20 years ago, but not fine now.
I think I just don't like his interview strategy either.
Yeah, he's the worst. He is the worst for interrupting.
Yeah,
people when they're in full flow.
Oh, he's notorious for that.
He's really bad at it, and nowadays that's something that isn't tolerated by very many politicians. But he had what was I saying? Oh yeah, he had the head of the Office for National Statistics on his program. And basically, the head of the ONS, he basically said that we are, as a country, we are the best at reporting our death rate, our infection rate in the whole world, because we count everything, whether deaths in hospital, deaths at home, deaths in care homes, whatever. Other countries in the world are just reporting hospital deaths.
Yeah.
Like Italy, Spain, Germany, France.
Not even in care homes.
Not even in care. Well, in Spain, I mean, there was that notorious case in Spain where the care home workers just left the care home and left the old age residents in it to die.
Yeah, they literally just left them to die.
Yeah, they literally just left them to die. So I think if you take those deaths into account more in those countries, you're likely to see a higher death rate numerically in those countries than in the UK.
The thing that's annoying me is, people like Andrew Marr saying, why is the situation, or actually he looks more like this, why does the situation in
God, you can't say, he did have a stroke, George, that is a bit harsh.
Well, I don't like the guy. Anyway.
Very brutal, I must say, that's
asking stupid questions like, why is the situation in care homes so bad? Well, I'm sorry, but it's literally a building full of the most vulnerable people.
It's like a living graveyard, let's put it that way.
Of course it's going to be bad. It's where people go to die.
I've seen a couple of interviews of just the silliest situation of people who had old age relatives, I think parents, grandparents, whatnot, who were living in care homes, who both died of the virus. And the first case was a woman I think it was her mother had died. And she was blaming the government, saying, "Oh, she wasn't protecting them, yada yada yada." And she was saying, and she was healthy and all this. But then she said, "Oh, but she was 96. She was 96 for goodness' sake."
To be fair, when you've got to 96, you've lived a good life. But unfortunately, relatives don't seem to think clearly after a family death.
The best one was this guy who I think it was his dad, or it was either his mum or his dad. I can't quite remember which. Who had died of the virus in a care home. they'd been in hospital for 3 months until last month after suffering with a stroke. They then put her in the care home basically to die, and she caught the virus and she died. And he was accusing the government of basically not protecting her enough. She just had a stroke and had just come out of hospital.
What a stupid relative.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't dispute that these people are going to be very sad over their relatives' deaths. I mean, obviously, it's sad when you lose anyone in your family.
Yeah.
But put it into context. These people were in their 90s. They were in the most vulnerable category. One of them had been seriously ill. I mean, I know this might sound callous, but you've got to take these factors into account when you're discussing the nature of people who've died of COVID.
Very true. I mean, when you pass 90 anyway, you've had a good life. You might as well. Well, it's going to come anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
without trying to sound grim.
Look at my granny. I mean, she was 94 when she died, and the last couple of years of her life, it was awful. It was very, very sad. She was very frail. She could barely walk. She was in pain a lot. She had dementia. I mean, it was horrendous. It was horrendous for her, and it was horrendous for me and the rest of my family, just watching her go like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it's actually, this can be taken the wrong way, but sometimes it's best for people to go quickly so they don't suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
That's
rather
exactly
than being kept alive for the sake of it.
That's exactly what I thought with my granny. That's exactly what I thought, because she was suffering, and it was awful for her, and it was awful for us to watch it.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of trying not to get too down, speaking of TV presenters, Piers Morgan's been tested for it.
Oh, Grim!
Yes, he displayed. I think you can.
Good.
I think the person we should feel sorry for in this case is COVID-19 rather than Piers.
That's a turn up, I must say.
He announced it was only yesterday. He announced that he developed a symptom of COVID-19, so he decided to get himself tested, which actually does ask the question: how the hell can he be considered a key worker and get a test?
Well, actually,
no idea.
It's
he must have blagged his way to get the test.
The funniest thing is that Piers Morgan has spent the past month complaining at the fact that Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock and people like that got tests, and
now
workers didn't. And
that is a sense of karma, you could say, I guess.
Yeah, and he is a second-rate television presenter who can't keep his mouth shut, and he's rude to women.
Oh, he's just a rude, arrogant, pompous bully, I think. Really, it's just had his day, I think, really.
I quite like him, actually. I don't think.
It's just my personal opinion, but I do think he's a bit of a tosser. Personally.
I don't think he's rude to women.
I agree with some of his views, but I can't stand him. I mean, he's just the most obnoxious little sod you could ever.
I think that's too less of a compliment than an obnoxious little sod.
He goes on about criticism of the press being autocratic and dictatorial. Mate, you were the one calling for an autocratic lockdown, for God's sake, and you were going on about it for months.
It's like we were saying last week. I mean, the media expect to question the government and that, but they don't expect the questions to be asked to them. It's hypocrisy, really.
Yeah, well, that's the point of living in a free society. It's great that we have a free media, but that media has to come under as much scrutiny and criticism as the next institution.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have a free society or a free media.
It's got to be there to function, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of this app?
Oh, the NHS app.
Yeah, I think it's
the
crap.
Good idea on paper, but
because
is it going to work in reality? That's the question.
Let's be honest. Most people won't download it.
I think it's
government surveillance and all. They're trying to track
old people won't know how to use it.
No, they won't. I personally think it is a good idea, but it isn't going to work.
Yeah.
No. The problem that
only young people download it, I think.
Yeah, and they say they need 50% of the population to download it for it to work effectively. Well, for a start off, don't trial it on the Isle of Wight. Just don't do it. because the Isle of
Do
Wight
it
is
somewhere
pretty
like London.
Yeah, the Isle of Wight is pretty sparsely populated. It's full of old people,
And they're probably,
and the signal's terrible.
Well, of course it would be terrible.
they're probably still working on the phones that you have to wind up.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've probably
No,
still got dial-up internet as
no.
well.
That'll be the Outer Hebrides. That'll be the Outer
Oh.
Hebrides. Sorry, I had a hiccup. That's good.
Oh, that's good.
Have you guys heard that that awful basically Radio 1 did a charity single to try and raise money.
I haven't heard about.
Neither have I.
They're singing a Foo Fighters song, and it's absolutely.
Oh yes, it was on BBC News yesterday.
No.
It's absolutely atrocious. It's
Well, of
people,
course it'd be atrocious.
Which Foo Fighters song?
a
one?
song called "Times Like These."
Oh,
And
And may have.
it's people like Rita Ora, Paloma Faith.
Oh, they're not going to do the Foo Fighters any justice then.
Paloma
And then-
and I sound like a broken down duck.
for some reason, this guy starts rapping in the middle of it.
No, you don't rap in a Foo Fighters song. That's heretical.
That is the definition of cringeworthy, just rapping in the middle of any rock song, to be honest.
Yeah.
Unless it's Walk This
It just
Way.
doesn't go down well, let's put it that way.
Unless it's Aerosmith.
Oh yeah, Run DMC
Yes,
and
unless it's
Aerosmith, that's an
Aerosmith
exception.
And Run DMC,
Yeah.
yes.
But that was kind of
That's a
that was
good
kind of
song,
different
actually.
for its time, yeah. But I think today it's a bit cringeworthy when people do that.
Yeah, Steven Tyler is just cringeworthy whenever he walks onto a television set.
Did
I mean,
you
yeah,
Did you see the? Have
definitely
you guys
cringeworthy.
seen the photo of him when he's just falling out of the shower?
No, I
Oh,
haven't.
no.
Yeah.
Does he
You
look
should-
like somebody's mum
you
or
should-
something?
You should look it up. Basically, he fell out of the shower and then decided it would be a good idea to post a picture of his face. And basically, all his teeth have fallen out,
Oh,
and he's got. A
Somebody
black
should have
eye.
told him not to walk this way.
I mean,
Oh,
oh,
Speaking of social media, it was Ed Ball's day last week.
it was Ed Ball's day last week.
Was it?
I never thought I'd say this, but I miss that guy.
Well, it's nearly been 5 years since he lost his seat as well. I've just been thinking about it now.
It'll be 5 years in a couple of days, I think.
Yeah. 7th of May, I believe we had.
7th of May.
Yeah, 7th of May
Actually, no,
2015, we had the general election.
No, technically it was the 8th of May because he lost it in the morning.
Oh, yes, of course. I remember that like it was only yesterday. That was one of my best memories of that night.
That was
And then
quite
that was
a
a
moment.
long cycle of too many elections.
It was.
We've had 3 in just under 5 years, plus that
4
referendum.
years.
Yeah.
And the Scottish independence referendum, if you count that as well.
That was in 2014.
And that's only just happened in
that
about
was-
5 years.
A once in a lifetime referendum, Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah. Anyway.
Unless it will be once in a lifetime if we win, is basically a policy.
Anyway, shall we move on to some international news? And this is the news.
Oh,
that Kim Jong-un is back, people.
I think he only just popped out for a burger and got lost.
Everybody's favourite Weight Watcher devotee who never turns up.
Hello, fatties.
Yeah. I mean,
I was watching the news, and on a serious matter, there was a fair few doctors basically saying, he is seriously
ill, and
his health. I mean, he smokes too much. He drinks too much.
Too much.
He's
and
massively overweight. And I don't.
That's because of the cheese and cognac.
I don't know if you've seen, but his sister has been at a lot of the events that he's been at. So
she was rumoured to take over from him.
Yeah,
in the event that he could lost his position.
Yeah, she's got. It was a couple of years ago when she started appearing in public alongside him, which is usually taken as a sign that she is in line for big things in the future. not in a,
I hope you don't mean big things in some other way.
not with Kim Jong-un in charge, obviously.
Oh, no, that'd be the wrong case of incest.
Oh, God.
I was never insinuating that. But the problem.
I can't believe you said she's in line for big thing.
I didn't mean it.
I
like
thought that
that.
was just a brilliant way of
But
describing that.
anyway, she's destined. She is likely to take over as supreme leader in the event of Kim Jong Un's early death. Which, let's be honest,
Or having a Mr. Creosote moment.
Yeah, when you look at him, you've got to ask yourself, he must have
How
so
old is
many
he?
heart. He's only in his 30s.
I think he's 35, 36.
He's in his
quite
late
young,
30s.
really.
He's in his late 30s, and nobody's really sure, but I think he's in his late 30s.
Knowing North Korea, it's hard to know official birth dates.
Early 40s, but I think it's late 30s.
Yeah,
right.
But the other thing, yeah, he's going to. Yeah, he if you look, his physical state is really not good. But Jesus Christ, man.
That's the noise he makes after a cheeseburger.
But the thing is that he does apparently have children, but they're both girls and they're both very, very young. They're
That
only
does
like
beg the
5 or
question.
6.
20 years plus before they make media appearances.
What woman would ever get with Kim Jong Un?
Well,
somebody who's brainwashed enough to think that Kim Jong Un is a god.
Well, if you're a North Korean woman, it'd be the ultimate catch.
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
I mean, they are literally brainwashed.
He's a
They're literally
leader.
brainwashed to worship the Kims from day one. So they literally think the Kims are like gods. I mean, it's laughable to us guys, but that's literally how they get brought up in North Korea.
So I'm sure Kim Kardashian will be very glad to hear that. If she's watching.
I mean, not Kim Kardashian. No, Kim Kardashian worshipping Kim Kardashian.
Worship the Kims. I think half the world does worship Kim Kardashian. I see.
Well, and also,
I'm glad to hear that, Matt.
Other Korea news is that they exchanged gunfire.
Yes, that
first time at the DMZ since 2017.
Yeah,
which is a bit of a shame.
No, it's 5 years.
2015.
Oh, I thought it was 2017.
There
when that defector escaped.
Yes, that's what. There was an incident in 2017 when a North Korean border guard
got all his comrades and went across the border.
Really?
Literally.
No, he didn't kill anyone or shoot at anyone. It's very rare for North Korean border guards to defect, I think. I mean, you must think they have a prime opportunity.
I mean, they're the most loyal in the regime, and the families will be punished if they did escape. So that's motivation enough.
This guy decided to risk it, and there's actually some pretty low quality video footage of it from a surveillance camera thing, and he was legging it, and the North Korean soldiers realised what was happening, and they went after him, and they shot him quite a few times. It was about 3 or 4 times they hit him. They didn't hit him anywhere they didn't hit any of his essential organs or anything. And he got to the southern side. He was taken in by South Korean border guards, and they started treating him for his bullet wounds. But as the doctors were treating him for his bullet wounds, they discovered that he had some sort of infection in his intestine, and that there were worms in it, live worms in it, which were essentially eating away at his inside. He recovered from it, and he's alive and well today, living in South Korea. But
that's good.
I mean, that tells you all you need to know about how badly treated these people are. And then in 2017 as well, it was a non-violent defection, but you had one of the highest level defections it's possible to get in North Korea. And I think it wasn't the ambassador. I think it was the deputy ambassador of North Korea to Britain.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Did he go to the embassy in London or something?
He left the North Korean embassy, and he went to the British. He went to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and I said, I want to defect.
Oh, it's just.
And then he went on to the South Korean embassy and got sorted out.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah.
And he's now living in South Korea, I think.
I mean, the way North Korea treats both its people and foreigners is terrible. I mean, there was that American tourist a couple of years ago who got sentenced to got a few years prison sentence in North Korean labor camp, and then when he got back, he was brain damaged, and unfortunately, he died.
He was released with severe brain damage, and as soon as he got into American hands, he fell into a coma. And there was nothing the doctors in America could do for him. I mean, that was just before the US travel ban came in force into North Korea. North Korea is actually the only country in the world where Americans are, for the time being, completely banned from going from.
Maybe they should do that here.
Well,
would save an extra year.
In all seriousness, if they carry on the way they are doing, I think some countries would ban them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just irresponsible how Trump's endorsing, complete irresponsibility.
It's okay him banning everyone going to America, but I mean, nobody's going to want them coming over here when there's the death
Absolutely,
rate,
yes.
And how many of them are getting infected.
Yeah, I mean that is the issue. I think but it's like with North Korea though. It must be, if you're from a tourist perspective, it must be an interesting place to kind of want to go and visit.
I mean, you're under surveillance literally from the moment you get into North Korea up to the moment you leave North Korea.
I mean, did either of you watch the Michael Palin documentary?
Yes, I did. I thought that was very interesting.
Is that
the one where he went? Is that the one where he went to an international airport and there's ploughed money into it, but there's literally nobody there?
Literally nobody there. It's a ghost airport.
That's just the case with North Korea in general. They plough all this money into these, what are actually quite good-looking buildings, and they look very strong, very appealing. They're not used.
They even do that for some towns as well.
Especially
on the North-South Korean border, there's literally a North Korean town that has nobody living in it.
But Pyongyang also apparently has the world's only 6-star hotel. There's nobody in it.
Did they inflate the ratings for that or something to get 6 stars?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's bizarre.
Then again, it is North Korea we're talking about, so
also it would be impossible to get a star rating in a hotel that has no customers because there'd be nobody to rate it.
Well, that you could say that, but bear in mind it is North Korea, and if you don't give it the top rating, they'll shoot you in the back of the head.
Absolutely. Or you'll be in a labour camp, never to be seen again.
Yeah, so you do have to take that into consideration.
I heard you can go to North Korea for free.
I don't
think you can.
I don't think that's possible, though.
No, I don't mean as in flying and stuff.
You can certainly get out for free, but it'll be at the cost of your own life if you fail.
No, I mean, you can...
It's a bit grim.
North Korea sort of do these trips, to sort of show you how great the country is. And when you get there, they'll sort of show you all the nice...
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it's very, very cheap. I wouldn't be surprised if it's very, very cheap. But the thing is that a lot of North Korea's tourist operations operate in China anyway, so you book it via Chinese agencies, and you then go from China into North Korea.
I believe the only flight that... Sorry, Matt, carry on.
Yeah, you can't really fly into North Korea from any other country apart from China and maybe
You have to come from
Russia.
Beijing first and Pyongyang.
Yeah, you have to go from Beijing to Pyongyang.
Well, it would be quite interesting to go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
if you want to cut, there might be a risk of coming back alive, though.
Yeah.
I'd also like to go to
as long as you don't do anything stupid, I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, you'd see a completely different perspective on life. Because what you've got to remember, the North Koreans, they are human beings like us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're living as normal a life as they can in the structure
it is
of their
normal
society. It is normal life for them, exactly. So it's just interesting to see.
Absolutely.
That.
I think the problem, some people have objections with going to North Korea because it's directly funding the regime. But that's North Korean
issue I would have.
The ordinary people, their conception of foreigners would be diminished if they saw foreigners as well. But even then, you're not really supposed to interact with the locals unless it's approved or anything by your guides.
Well, they don't really interact with you. I mean, I've seen loads of clips of tourists, generally American tourists in North Korea, and they try and interact with the locals, and the locals either completely ignore them and walk off, or they might just have a brief conversation with them.
Well, they can't speak English.
Well, you'd be
Well,
surprised.
they have somebody translating Korean, I think.
In some cases, yes, but Pyongyang is also the home of a lot of North Korea's elites, a lot of whom do speak English and very good English, because they went to very good schools. If you tried it in the North Korean countryside, they won't
have a clue what you're on about.
They wouldn't be able to speak English. They just speak Korean.
I'd quite like to go to Russia as well.
Yeah,
really Moscow at some point.
Oh, for goodness' sake! I quite
It's
like
a fabulous country, though. I think if you take out the politics,
I quite like to visit. Moscow doesn't do anything for me. I'm not bothered about visiting Moscow. I'd really like
St. Petersburg.
Yeah, St. Petersburg is a place I'd really like to visit.
Yeah, I'd like to go to. I've been to Germany, but I didn't really go for touristy things.
I mean, I've been to Berlin.
Whereabouts did you go in Germany, George? Was it Hamburg or Munich?
It wasn't Munich. I think it was near Hamburg. I was doing some gigs, so I didn't really go for.
So you didn't really see the real Germany then?
No, I'd like to go to Berlin.
Berlin's brilliant. I've been to Berlin. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you go on the Year 10 trip, Matt?
I did. I went on the Year 10. Well, it wasn't just Year 10. I just happened to be in Year 10. It was open to Year 12, Year 11, and Year 12. But it would also,
if I was to visit Germany, it would coincide with the book that I'm reading at the moment.
No, I know.
Is it going to be some political extremism or something we're going to see here? Oh God, what's he going to get?
It's Mein Kampf, isn't it?
Oh no.
Oh.
It is the dark charisma of Adolf Hitler.
Oh Lord!
Right.
It's actually very interesting. It's basically
Is it basically a biography of Hitler?
No, it's basically it's so I don't know who the author is. Well, his name's here obviously, but I don't know who he is. But he's basically going through how such an evil and madman could basically get the whole of a country to back him.
Yeah.
Which he did when he was getting to power.
I mean, the amount of charisma he had was ridiculous, to be honest. No wonder people bought into his charade.
The thing with the German population, because I've studied this when I was at university, he did control them completely through fear more than anything else. The German people who were out and out Nazis, in which they believed everything Hitler stood for, and supported everything he did, was actually relatively comparatively small.
Yeah, the minority.
He instituted such a powerful idea in the German heads that they were under constant surveillance that it's frightened the life out of them. So the vast majority of Germans were too scared to do anything to oppose him. Now that raises questions about, could they have done something to oppose him even if they were scared? Were they complicit in the murder of 6 million Jews? There's loads of debates you can have about that. I've read books which argues that they were complicit. I've read books that argues that they weren't. But it does make a lot of very interesting historiographical arguments about that case, because when you actually look at the size of the police state that Hitler created, it's actually quite small. Because like with the Gestapo, for example, we think of the Gestapo as this, massive organization with millions of members.
That just seemed to be everywhere.
Yeah, that just seemed to be everywhere. They only had a few thousand members. They relied purely on ordinary people informing on their neighbours if they did anything wrong, out of pure fear.
Kind of a don't trust your neighbour kind of cycle as a result.
Yeah. And that fed into this idea that, we must report it to the Gestapo because they're going to find out anyway because they have eyes and ears everywhere. Well, that wasn't the case. The Gestapo was actually quite a small organisation.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting part in history, I think, reading about Germany in that time as well. And also before Hitler as well.
Yeah.
After the First World War.
Yeah, with Weimar Germany and all that.
Price of a bread loaf, hyperinflation.
Yeah. It's like with Nazi Germany, studying it is absolutely fascinating because there's no other society quite like it that's ever existed.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And it's not that long ago.
No, it's not that long ago.
Well, I mean, it was 80+ years, but even so, it's still
In the
relatively
basic
new
of
in
things,
history.
it's not long ago.
80 years isn't a long time. I mean, people, I know people that are 80 years old.
Yeah, and it's very, very fascinating in that sense because there's nothing else like it.
It is quite bizarre though how Hitler did care a lot about animal welfare.
Yeah, that's the weirdest.
That is one of the
take on
most
it.
interesting things I've ever heard about him, to be honest.
It is because he was because the thing is he was a vegetarian as well.
Wasn't he a bit of a drug addict as well?
Oh yeah, he did crystal meth, I believe.
There's a lot of
at
debates.
some point.
There's a lot.
No wonder he was so paranoid in his final few days.
There's a lot of debates about that. I think it has been verified. I think that Hitler, for medicinal reasons, took morphine and several other drugs, possibly including something similar to crystal meth, but that's not been verified.
Oh, right.
But the fact that he started taking these drugs for health complaints, of course, he became addicted to them, and that just fed into his paranoia. I mean, the Nazi that was really addicted to morphine
was it Hermann Göring?
Hermann Göring, exactly.
Yeah.
He was absolutely blasted on the stuff. I mean, there's an absolutely hilarious video clip of him in which his eyes, it's like he must injected himself with a whole vat of morphine. His eyes are like, he's like that.
Let's just inject ourselves with that.
I mean, it's scary. When
The Germans,
that it makes you look like that.
It is nothing to fool around with, morphine.
No,
it really is. It really does make you look wide-eyed.
Yeah, I mean, it's also documented that several other Nazi leaders had addictions.
That wouldn't surprise me, to be honest.
Whatnot, but Hermann Göring is the most notorious for it, for being a morphine addict.
Well, I did not see that coming, I'll tell you that.
Christ. Oh, God.
That is just brilliant.
So when you look at Hitler, I mean, yeah, Hitler was awful and one of the worst dictators who ever lived, but you've got to look at other dictators as well, because some of them were just off the scale in terms of crazy.
We can all Pol Pot's.
Pol
Pot. You know who Pol Pot?
I thought
leader of Cambodia from 1975 to 1979.
I thought he said. I thought he said.
Oh, I see.
I thought he said Pol Potts.
Pol Potts.
Oh yeah, the singer.
The Britain's Got Talent opera singer. He is not a dictator.
It's an
Pol Potts is a dictator. It'd be terrible. That's
an unfortunate name comparison. There was genuinely a dictator called Pol Pot.
Wasn't he one of the worst ever?
Yeah.
In terms of deaths by population, yes, he was. He was the leader.
In fact, didn't Top Gear do a little segment on him?
They did.
Or the Grand Tour.
Yeah, with the Grand Tour.
Was it on the Grand Tour?
Yeah, the last.
Which series was that?
It was Seaman.
Oh yes, I remember now. Yes. Didn't they go and see the skulls as well, which they have in a museum?
I think they might have done. Yeah. I mean,
it's quite grim that, but essential to see how it was.
Yeah, because with Pol Pot, he was the leader of the Khmer Rouge, which was basically the communist organisation in Cambodia. And the Khmer Rouge took control of Cambodia in 1975, and they ruled the country for 4 years until 1979, when they were forced out of power by the Vietnamese, who invaded.
They tried to convert Cambodia into agricultural society.
Yeah, they basically took
from year zero, basically.
Yeah, they basically took an extremist version of Maoism, so the teachings of Chairman Mao in China, in which they decided to wipe out any sort of what they considered to be intellectualism. So me and George would have been screwed because we're both musicians, and they killed all musicians. They killed teachers. They killed lawyers, doctors. They killed anyone who wore glasses.
That's ridiculous, I must
because
say.
it was seen as a sign of Western intellectualism if you wore glasses. They tried to basically turn the population of Cambodia into
A giant farm.
a giant farm, essentially, in which, and just millions either starved to death or were killed by Khmer Rouge.
It's incredibly grim
soldiers.
as well, even just reading about it.
And in the end, I think I'm right in saying Cambodia had a population of 8 million in 1975. By 1979, it had halved to 4 million.
Jesus. Yeah. That is awful.
How did they starve if they were all farmers?
They got meagre rations, I believe.
Because it was collective farming, so they didn't get any of the produce that they farmed. It all went into these vast collective farms, and they were given such small rations.
Is it a bit like the Irish potato famine?
That's a bit. I probably wouldn't compare it to that.
No, not in that sense, because the Irish potato famine wasn't a forced genocide. That was just a very, very unfortunate incident in which the British government did a lot more to help the Irish people. Well, I wouldn't even say it was bad luck. The British government should have helped a lot more, but they didn't do nearly as much as they could have done.
No,
but with the Cambodian genocide, it was a forced act of killing, essentially.
Then Pol Pot went on the run for quite some time, I believe.
He did. He went on the run until he was on. He went on
the run and then in the got talent.
Hi, I used to be a dictator. I'm going to sing you a song.
he went on the run for quite a long time. He got captured in the 1990s, and then he was going to be put on trial, but he died of a heart attack before he was put on trial.
That's a nasty way to go.
But the place that you want to go for the craziest dictators who've ever lived is Africa.
Robert Mugabe?
Robert Mugabe isn't even close. I mean, he was pretty bad.
Go on, who's the top one?
Well, I can't decide really between the former leader of the Central African Republic, who's a guy called Jean Bedel Bokassa, and the leader of, I think it has to go to the the former president of Equatorial Guinea, who was a guy called Francisco Macias Nguema.
Oh, I think I've heard of the chap who was president of Equatorial Guinea before.
Probably because I told you about him. This guy is sort of imperial level dictator in terms of madness. He came to power after the Spanish left the country, and he established himself as president for life, all the normal dictator stuff. He kept the entire treasury of Equatorial Guinea underneath his bed in a hut in the middle of nowhere. And he spent most of his time there. So that and because he basically had control of all the money, Equatorial Guinea had frequent power cuts because they have no money in their energy industry, and the power could only be turned on if he was visiting the capital city, which was very, very rare.
Oh, so they basically had little to no electricity at all.
They had no electricity unless the president visited the capital city. You then had, I think, one of the worst thing he ever did, he arrested about 100 of his, what he deemed to be political rivals, took them into the capital, Malabo's football stadium, and because it was around Christmas time, he decided to have them gunned down by soldiers dressed as Father Christmas to the tune of Donna Summer's Those Were the Days.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. Goes and shoots a few political prisoners.
I mean, that was the craziest thing he ever
Who was
did.
the chap that ran the Central African Republic, Matt?
Yeah, Jean Bedel Bokassa. He was a former military officer in the French army because the Central African Republic used to be a French colony. He was in the French army, and he overthrew the president of the Central African Republic, established himself as a military dictator, and he was basically just completely balmy. I mean,
understandable.
We can all agree that the worst dictator ever to have lived is Mussolini.
In terms of
Mussolini.
actually operating as a dictator,
Yeah, that's what I
kind
mean.
of, yeah. Well,
And his own people
started
turned on him eventually as well.
I mean, the only caveat to that is that he did rule his country for 21 years.
Yeah,
1923 to 1944, or 43, I mean, sorry.
No, 1922 to 1943.
Oh, yeah, I thought so.
But the thing with Mussolini is that he said his ultimate goal was to create a new Roman Empire. He had one success, which was the conquest of Ethiopia.
1935.
In 1935, which was one of the worst acts of warfare ever committed by anyone.
And the League of Nations did nothing to stop it, which shows how useless they were.
Absolutely nothing to stop the invasion of Ethiopia. And I think it's one of only a few occasions since World War One where poison gas was used in warfare. Because after World War One, the use of poison gas was banned by an international agreement. Since then, it's only been used a few times, and that was one of the occasions when it was used.
I don't quite get things like that when they ban things, because surely in war, I mean, you know, if you're trying to win a war, you're going to do anything.
Well, you can say
but even so, I mean, it's a horrible way to die, poison gas.
Well, what you got to remember is that
so's getting shot in the head.
But after World War One, I think the use of poison gas in that war by both sides had shocked people so much. And because it's also an incredible.
It was a new invention at that time as well.
It's also an incredibly debilitating way to die, in a very painful way to die. And I think
at least when you get shot, it happens quickly most of the time.
Most of the time, not all the time. I think that's the argument with being shot. That if you die immediately from being shot, it's very quick, relatively painless death. Whereas with poison gas, whatever
it's prolonged
happens,
suffering.
It's prolonged, it's very slow, and it's very painful. And I think also the scale at which it killed people, because one little bit of poison gas could kill loads and loads of people at the same time. So it shocked people so much that after World War One, an international agreement was signed banning its usage ever being used again. And surprisingly, it has held relatively well, with the exception, of course, of the Italian invasion of Ethiopia,
Iran-Iraq War,
the Iran-Iraq War, and obviously some people count the Holocaust, some don't, because some people class it as a peacetime, as not being related to war. A wartime crime, which it was. And I think a few occasions where the Japanese used it in China.
Oh, right. In the late 1930s, I presume.
In the 30s, yeah. In the 30s and the early 40s.
Anyway,
are we gonna?
This is getting quite dark.
Shall we move on to the game without trying to sound even more dark?
We have to christen
Triple H.
Game.
No.
No, George.
I thought we were doing our usual thing that we do any week.
Triple H is called the game.
Oh yes.
Nobody else.
The WWE wrestler.
Yeah. Nobody else followed wrestling.
Motorhead actually recorded a song called The Game.
They did. Motorhead recorded all these entrance songs.
Because Triple H is a massive fan of Motorhead.
They all sounded exactly the same.
Well, that is Motorhead for you. I mean, they don't really deviate into multiple genres. It's just heavy metal, straight off.
And Lemmy trying to sing.
If you try to gamble, I take all your money. You win some, you lose some, you do the same to me. Oh, Lemmy.
Ace of Spades is a good song, I do have to say.
Oh, very true, yes.
It does go on for a bit, though.
It's
just
quite
the same
good, though.
thing
I think it's a
over and
good
over
mixture between punk and heavy metal.
At least it's quite fast-paced.
Yeah. The funny thing about Lemmy is that no matter how rich he got, he never moved out of the apartment he had above a pub.
That's true, he never did.
That is a bit badass, I must say.
Yeah.
And wasn't it in Stoke-on-Trent as well, where he was from, or am I thinking of somewhere else? Oh.
The thing with Lemmy is it's remarkable he lived for as long as he actually did.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he drank a bottle of Jack Daniels every day for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And he had that stupid...
And chain smoked.
I mean, the amount of wealth he had, he could have got rid of the war on his face.
Yeah, he really could. He could have got rid of the war.
The war.
The warts.
Oh, right. I thought you said the Oh, yes, I know what you mean now. I was a bit confused then.
Then again, if Lemmy Kilmister turned up to peace negotiations during a war, you would do as he said, which would actually be, let's be honest, would actually be just carry on, do what you want.
Otherwise, you get subjugated to Ace of Spades for 24 hours straight.
Anyway,
I think Harry's doing it.
Well, yes, of course, this week. Wow.
Takes the pressure off us.
This could be interesting.
Yeah, first one to discuss. Love Island.
Oh,
that's quite topical, actually.
It's because he cancelled.
They literally just announced in the news today that this summer series is going to get cancelled.
And it therefore proves that Jesus Christ does exist.
Well, I mean, I've never actually seen Love Island, so I can't comment.
You're not missing out on anything.
I can comment on I have seen the contestants, and I can comment that they look like they have the IQ of a slug.
I didn't know what Brexit was for a start.
I was once forced to watch an episode of it by some.
When you say forced,
well, they just made me watch it, and it was dire. It was absolutely dire.
I mean, it's for degenerates to watch.
Yeah, it's
without sounding awful.
It is true, though.
It was, oh god.
And also not evading the fact that it's caused 3 deaths.
Yeah, it's caused 3 deaths.
Yeah, that's not been taken off for telly, unlike
Jeremy Kyle.
Jeremy Kyle.
That caused 1 death, and that got taken off there. And yes, the Jeremy Kyle show was an awful program, but there's the fine line by saying about, this program has caused 3 deaths, but we're going to keep it on air because it's ridiculously popular. No, it's caused 3 deaths. You have a moral obligation to stop it after it's caused the first death.
I feel like it's also very endangering on contestants' mental health as well.
Yeah, because
it's not healthy at all.
Well, after it's finished, they're just followed around constantly. And some people love it, and some people hate it. So of course they're going to...
It's the whole thing of getting famous too quickly.
Yeah. You just burn out.
Yeah, look at Macaulay Culkin.
Well, Michael Jackson.
Oh, lads, this is getting dark now.
Macaulay Culkin does look really bad.
He's better than he was. He has turned out not too bad at the moment.
No.
He has turned his life around a bit.
Wasn't he homeless at some point as well?
I think
he wasn't homeless. He was just home alone.
Oh.
Well done.
That is a good one, George. I take my hat off to you, though.
Anyway, can we have another one?
So what's your opinions in general on rap music?
Terrible.
As I expected from that.
I do like Eminem. I like Dr. Dre. I like NWA.
Straight
out of Compton.
Yeah, which I believe Dr. Dre came out of NWA, didn't he?
Yeah.
I don't like rap music when they constantly use the N-word and talk about,
Stormzy.
Yeah, I don't like, and when they start banging on about, Stormzy's a prime example, actually, criticizing, governments. Well, I'm not being funny, but the amount of money he's got, he doesn't exactly live the life that he preaches.
No, exactly. Yeah. He's a hypocrite.
Champagne socialist, one could say.
In fairness, I'll be a bit kinder towards rap musicians. I appreciate that it can be, and I emphasise can be, quite clever how they craft their lyrics and their songs. I do appreciate that, because I'm like listening to some early rap stuff in particular from the 80s and the 90s.
Sugar Hill Gang.
Yeah, some of that's actually very, very clever.
Matt might like the Beastie Boys. They're not exactly rap music, but they are.
They're a bit like punk and hip hop together. I think. The Beastie Boys.
It's the same with any music. It's a bit like Bono. If they just shut up and just concentrate. Just do the music and stop talking about
Yeah.
political
Unpopular
things.
opinion, I think U2 before the mid-1990s were one of the greatest bands of all time. But as you say, due to Bono, that's tainted their reputation.
And until U2 got so awful that they had to give away their album for free
Yeah.
and force it on
U2
everybody's iPhone.
Yeah, U2. I mean, I was in Dublin last summer, and the Irish absolutely hate Bono.
Oh yeah, they do.
They absolutely despise him because they just think
Doesn't surprise me.
They just think he's a hypocrite.
When he has a go at people for avoiding tax, yet he has about 800 million himself and doesn't pay much himself. I mean, that's just the point of hypocrisy.
Yeah. Anyway, should we do one more?
One last one.
Yeah.
One that I've been watching on Netflix a lot recently. Doctor Who. Discuss.
Shit.
Right.
Ooh.
Okay. This is going to take me a while.
Utterly awful.
I don't think it's all bad, Doctor Who. I think the first few series for new show is quite good, personally.
Right. This is going to take me a while because I'm a massive Doctor
Go on,
Who
Matt.
fan. Right. The original series, which was broadcast from 1963 to 1989, is brilliant. You can forgive some of the crappy sets and terrible effects, but in terms of the actual concept of the show, and a lot of the stories and it's great. It's really, really great. When it came back, with Chris Eccleston and
2005.
in 2005, yeah, again, great. I mean, David Tennant, I think, is one of the best Doctors out of all of the actors who have played Doctor. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. Chris Eccleston, the series he did was great, and he was great. I just think he should have done another series.
Yeah.
Matt Smith, I mean, I've rewatched some of the Matt Smith ones, and I actually like them more than when I first watched them, when they first came out. And Matt Smith's era got progressively less good as time went on. Peter Capaldi, I really liked. I liked his era very much, and his Doctor. It's ever since Jodie Whittaker took over as Doctor and Chris Chibnall took over as head writer that the series has just gone.
Yeah, I was watching
shite.
the episode on New Year's Day, and it was a bit disappointing in my opinion.
That was one of the better episodes.
It might just be me though, but I think Doctor Who has become a bit more for the hardcore fans over the years rather than the casual television viewers.
Really
and again, it might just
really
be personal taste, but
it really
that's how I thought of it.
It's done the exact opposite, Harry. It's completely through what the hardcore fans loved and torn it to shreds.
How so, if you don't mind me asking?
Because it's completely rewritten Doctor Who canon. It's completely changed it.
Oh.
And not many Doctor Who fans like that at all.
But the problem is, nobody really watches Doctor Who these days.
And also
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember when watching Doctor Who on a Saturday night was the event of the week for me.
Yeah, it was for me. And then it's just, I mean, moving it to Sundays was a terrible idea. But the issue I have
Are
as
you
well,
honestly saying that watching Doctor Who on a Saturday was the event of your week?
Well, for an 11-year-old kid, yes, it
was.
That's when, for me, Doctor Who was good. It was after the first series of Matt Smith. That's when it started to get a bit too... That's when I just started switching off, basically.
But
I thought the episodes were just a bit,
But the issue I have as well is like, I mean, I don't mind there being a female Doctor, but they could have got a better actress than Jodie Whittaker to do it.
I kind of feel like she's a bit forced.
She's incredibly forced, and it's so annoying how she plays the character, and it's just stop.
Yeah,
I just don't get Doctor Who. I mean, to me, it's awful. There's a choice of something like X-Men, where they actually have cool powers, or someone like Doctor Who has a sonic screwdriver.
That's the point, though. He's just a madman in a box. He hasn't got any superpowers.
A Time Lord, so to speak.
Intelligence and a time machine, and that's
two hearts.
That's the whole point. He's not meant to have any superpowers.
I just think it's terrible.
Well, we're never going to agree on Doctor Who. Or on
Let's
many
just
other
say agree
television
to disagree
shows.
here, chaps.
Can we have one more that isn't Doctor Who?
Winston Churchill. That's literally what I can think of off the top of my head. But seeing as we've got a 75th anniversary coming up,
The VE Day, yes.
I thought that'd be an interesting topic for discussion.
I think the thing you got to take into account with Winston Churchill is like most what would be termed great figures from history, he's an incredibly flawed man. I mean, you cannot. He was responsible for some things which obviously weren't very good, like
the Bengali famine.
The Bengal famine, for example, where he could have taken a more active role in helping the people who lived in the Bengal region. And it's.
I think the thing with someone like Churchill, who's done something as good as bringing a country through war.
Yeah, I mean
that's all they're ever going to be remembered for.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, yeah, you cannot take that.
It's like Nelson Mandela. They'll
always be remembered.
Although he did some truly bad things, he'll always be remembered for being good.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's the same with Gandhi, because Gandhi is revered by peaceful activists, protesters, and whatnot. But he was essentially a paedophile, and he was also a paedophile.
Was he?
And and he was a massive anti-Semite.
Oh.
He wrote some.
I didn't know that.
He wrote some very disturbing things about Jews, and also what his own personal beliefs, what he thought India should be like after the British left, are really disturbing. He essentially wanted to create a state which took away all modern institutions, because he was a devout Hindu. He believed in an ideology.
Super-traditional society.
Yeah, he believed in an ideology called Hind Swaraj, which was basically living according to the rules set by the Hindu gods, in which there would be no hospitals, no railways, no business, no army, nothing that he would count as Western or modern. So what are you supposed to do if somebody gets sick? Or, or if you need to defend yourself?
Oh, damn, you can't go to the hospital there.
I mean,
well, they would have been screwed now.
And in the years leading up to Gandhi's assassination, he actually was listened to a lot less by people in the Indian National Congress, who just found him a bit of an irritant, really.
Yeah, he also never wore shoes.
Once he
flip-flops.
Once he
as Gordon Ramsay made fun of once.
Yeah, once he committed himself to his cause, he never did, because he was actually very intelligent, was Gandhi, because he was a lawyer in South Africa.
Just a very flawed person as well, like Churchill.
Yeah, I mean, look, all the historical greats are flawed people. Like we look at Alexander the Great as this great conqueror. That's the point. He was a conqueror. He was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. Same with great war leaders.
I mean, you can
apply to any field as well.
You can flip it round in anything. Someone like, there's no disputing Hitler was a god-awful man, but I mean, he actually created quite a lot of
lots of jobs. Yes,
well,
especially
autobahns.
Those autobahns aren't going to build themselves.
Without that, I mean, Germany might have taken a bit of a while to adapt to the new.
Well,
to be fair, Germany's done the best out of the EU.
Yeah, but that's nothing to do with Hitler.
Oh no,
that was due,
after 1945.
That was due to the US ploughing billions of dollars into what that was then the West German economy.
Yeah,
but it's like
basically, if you want to do well, lose a war.
Yeah, but it's like it's like with Joseph Stalin though, because even now he's quite revered by quite a lot of people in Russia, because I mean, notwithstanding that, because he did kill millions of people. He was one of the most brutal mass murderers in history, and he didn't care about the lives of the people who he was killing. But you get a lot of people in Russia nowadays arguing that Stalin was the man who was responsible for turning Russia into a peasant economy, which depended on farming, into one of the world's most powerful countries that had the capability to detonate a nuclear bomb.
And some Poles in Russia,
in the space of
a
30,
lot of
40
people
years.
still have very nostalgic opinions of Stalin.
They do,
apparently.
which is very, very worrying.
That's Russia, though.
Yeah, it is Russia.
I mean, they're just like
Anyway.
the vodka and cabbage.
I like cabbage.
I like vodka.
Winner, chicken dinner.
Well,
Anyway.
once the pub's open,
We'll have the vodka and cabbage.
They won't know what it'll hit them.
whenever
Anyway.
the hell that'll be, but anyway.
Yeah.
There'll be more money for Major Toms anyway, at least.
Yeah. Anyway, should we call it a day there, chaps?
Oh, I was just getting into the groove of it then.
We have been doing.
Oh, to be fair, we have been filming for over an hour, so
Yes.
yeah, we'll call it a day there.
Right, you can do your.
Okay, I'll do my usual thing.
Just
Okay.
do not use the word that you used last week.
Don't say it.
Okay, we'll not discuss that. Thank
Although
you very
it was
much.
hilarious.
Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Hope you give us a like on Facebook or a subscribe on YouTube. Whatever you do, give us a follow. Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh.